Hello friends, today we will learn about microbial pathogenicity. Here we will study about microbes and related terms like microbes and infection, types of infection, transmission of infection, factors predisposing of microbial pathogenicity, types of infectious diseases, all we will discuss in this video. So let's begin. The host parasite relationship is determined by the interactions between host factors and infecting microorganisms. Health and disease depends on the equilibrium between the two. Now let's know about microbes and related terms. First term is microbes. Microbes can be divided into saprophytes and parasites based on their relationship to their host. Now come to saprophytes. These are free living microbes that live on dead or decaying organic matter. They found in soil and water. They are generally unable to invade the living body. However, when host resistant to lower, some saprophytes like Bacillus subtilis may cause infection. Now come to parasite. A parasite is a microorganism which lives on a living host and derives nutrition from the host without any benefit to the host. Now come to let's know about some related terms. So let's begin with the terms. First is commensals. Commensals live in complete harmony with the host without causing any harm to it. They constitute the normal flora of the body such as Staphylococcus epidermidis of skin and E. coli of gastrointestinal tract. Pathogen. Let's know about pathogen. Microorganisms capable of producing disease in the host is called pathogen. Pathos means suffering and gen means disease. Now come to opportunistic pathogens. Some commensals or saprophytes can produce disease when host resistance is lowered. Pathogenicity. Let's know about pathogenicity. It refers to the ability of a class of microbes to produce disease. Virulence. It is the degree of pathogenicity of a microbe. Now come to infection. Infection, that means the lodgement and multiplication of a parasite in the body is known as infection. All infections do not invariably result in disease. Now come to type of infection. Primary infection. Initial infection with a parasite in a host is termed primary infection. Now come to reinfection. Subsequent infection with the same parasite in the same host is called reinfection. Now come to secondary infection. When the body resistance is lowered by a pre-existing infectious disease, a new parasite sets up an infection. This is termed secondary infection. Now come to cross infection. When a patient already suffering from a disease acquired a new infection from other host or another external source, it is known as cross infection. Now come to nosocomial infection. Cross infection acquired in hospitals is called hospital acquired or hospital associated or nosocomial infection. Now come to iatrogenic infection. An iatro sorry not latro iatronic iatrogenic infection. An iatrogenic infection is defined as physician-induced infection resulting from drug therapy or investigative procedures. Now come to subclinical infection. When clinical symptoms of an infection are not apparent, it is known as subclinical infection. Now come to latent infection. Following infection, some parasites may remain in a latent or hidden form in host tissues, and they proliferate and produce clinical disease when the host resistance is lowered. It is known as latent infection. Now come to atypical infection. In this type of infection, the typical or characteristic clinical manifestations of the particular infectious diseases are not present. Now come to transmission of infection. There are three links in the chain of transmission of communicable diseases. These links include the reservoir mode of transmission and susceptible host. Now come to reservoir. It refers to any human being, animal, plant, soil or inanimate matter in which parasite normally lives, multiplies and depends primarily for its survival. The reservoir and source of infection are one and the same in most instances. Sometimes they may be different. Example, reservoir of Clostridium botulinum is the soil, but the source of infection is contaminated food. Now come to source of infection. These may be endogenous sources of or exogenous sources. And let's know about endogenous sources. Organisms of normal flora are usually non-pathogenic, but occasionally they behave as pathogens outside their habitat. E. coli, which are the normal flora of the intestines, may cause urinary tract infection. Another example of viridans streptococci, which are the normal flora of mouth, may cause infective endocarditis. Now come to exogenous sources. Most of the infections are exogenous in origin. Exogenous sources include human cases and carriers, animals, insects, soil and water and food. Now let's know about human cases and carriers. The commonest source of human infection is man himself. The parasite may originate from a patient or a carrier. Now come to carrier. A carrier is a person who harbors the pathogenic microorganisms without suffering from its ill effects. Several types of carriers are known. Now come to healthier carrier. So, human cases and carriers. The commonest source of human infection is man himself. The parasite may originate from a patient or a carrier. Now come to carrier. A carrier is a person who harbors the pathogenic microorganisms without suffering from its ill effects. Several types of carrier are known. Now come to healthy carrier. One who harbors the pathogen but has never suffered from the disease caused by that particular pathogen. Convalescent carrier, one who has recovered from the disease but continues to harbor the pathogen in his body. Now come to temporary carrier. It depends on the duration of carriers. The temporary carrier state lasts for less than 6 months. Now come to chronic carrier. When carrier state lasts for several years and sometimes even for the rest of one's life, it is called chronic carrier. Now come to paradoxical carrier. It refers to a carrier who acquires the pathogen from another carrier. Now come to contact carrier. A person who acquires the pathogen from a patient carrier are very important source of infection to spread the disease in a community. Now come to animals. Many pathogens are capable of causing infection in both man and animal. Animals may therefore act as sources of human infection. The infection in animal may be asymptomatic and these animals act as the reservoir of animal infections. These are called reservoir hosts. Infectious diseases transmitted from animals to man are called zoonoses. Now let's know about zoonotic diseases may be bacterial, viral, protozoal or helminthic or fungal. Now first let's know about bacterial. Example, bovine tuberculosis, salmonella food poisoning, viral that is rabies from dogs, protozoal disease means leishmaniasis, helminthic, helminthic that is hydatid disease from dogs, fungal that is dermatophytes from cats and dogs. Now come to insects. Block sucking insects such as mosquitoes, ticks, mites, flies, fleas, and lice may transmit a number of pathogens to man. The diseases so caused are called arthropod-borne diseases. Insect transmitting these pathogens are known as vectors. They are of two types, mechanical vectors and biological vectors. Mechanical vectors. These carry the organisms on their legs, wings and body and transmit them to the eatables. Example, transmission of dysentery or typhoid bacilli to man through food by domestic fly. Now come to biological vectors. The pathogen multiplies in the body of the vector, often undergoing part of a development cycle in it. Such vectors are named biological vectors. Example, female Anopheles mosquitoes in malarial parasite, Culex mosquito in filarious parasite. Now come to extrinsic incubation period. After the entry of pathogen into the vector, the time required for the vector to become infective is called extrinsic incubation period. Besides acting as vectors, some insects may also act as a reservoir host. Example, ticks in relapsing fever. Infection is maintained in such insects by transviral passage. Now come to soil and water. Some pathogens may survive in the soil for very long periods. Spores of tetanus and gas gangrene bacilli remain viable in the soil for several decades and serve as a source of infection. Fungi causing histoplasmosis and parasites such as roundworm and hookworm also survive in soil and cause human infection. Now come to contamination of water with pathogenic microorganisms. Example, Vibrio cholerae